In early 1996, the historic stone ruins along the waterfront of Port Arthur formed a quiet, unassuming heritage site on the Tasmanian coast. But in April, that quiet stillness was shattered. A sudden, devastating attack turned this peaceful destination into the epicenter of a national crisis, forcing a grieving country to demand immediate answers. 35 people lost their lives that day in a single, sustained mass shooting. At the time, Australia had a deeply ingrained gun culture. Firearms were heavily tied to rural identity and agricultural life, and ownership was largely unregulated. The sheer magnitude of the violence at Port Arthur broke through the usual political inertia. The standard debates and legislative delays evaporated. The government faced a stark choice: accept random mass violence as a permanent fixture of modern life, or attempt an immediate cultural reset. Newly elected Prime Minister John Howard decided to channel the nation's grief directly into legislative action. He set an incredibly tight deadline. Within 12 days of the tragedy, they drafted the National Firearms Agreement. To force this legislation through Parliament, Howard had to directly challenge powerful, entrenched lobbying groups and even factions within his own rural voter base. That 12-day window proved that a government can completely overhaul its legal framework almost overnight when driven by absolute conviction. The first pillar was uncompromising: a total ban on automatic and semi-automatic weapons. For remaining legal firearms, the government implemented strict licensing requirements. Citizens had to prove a justifiable need to own a gun, like commercial pest control. They also had to address the newly banned weapons already in circulation. They did this through a massive mandatory gun buyback program. Hundreds of thousands of previously legal firearms were actively surrendered by citizens, collected by the state, and physically destroyed. The National Firearms Agreement actively and physically dismantled the country's capacity to inflict mass casualties. So did this aggressive legislative experiment actually work? This chart tracks mass shootings in Australia. You can see frequent spikes in the years leading up to 1996. But right at the intervention point of the new laws, the line sharply drops to zero, and it stayed there. Over the following decades, that statistical shift has held stable. The numbers mathematically verify the Australian response as a successful blueprint for public safety. Port Arthur carries a heavy legacy. It remains a site of permanent mourning for 35 victims, but the response to the tragedy created a safer nation. Today, the Australian model serves as a global benchmark, frequently studied by other nations trapped in recurring cycles of gun violence. The data proves that a deep-seated culture is not an unchangeable law of nature. With decisive action and clear intent, a government can rewrite a country's future.